Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video podcast on the moments that matter in the employee journey. As we pursue and start this lovely new year, we're going to be digging deeper into the topic of leadership and generation gap to be able to understand better this topic, which is quite complex in itself and has a lot to be said. We've invited our special guest today, Laurence. Thank you very much for saying yes to this opportunity and for joining us on this video podcast. And secondly, we are also with us today and co-hosting this podcast, Daniel, the commercial director for the UK market at Luta One, who is today's main partner. First of all, and I think it's the best way to start off the discussion, Laurence, why don't you start with an introduction from your side so that our audience can have a better understanding of your background?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Laurence or Lawrence, whichever works. I'm originally from Montreal, Canada, but I've been living now in Denmark for over 18 years, actually. And professionally, I am heading marketing in a company named Vestas, which is the largest wind energy company in the world. And that's what I do. And I'm a leader, and I love to talk about leadership challenges. So that's why I'm here today.
Well, speaking of leadership, why would you say leadership? Because for our audience out there, we of course had a pre-discussion prior to this day of recording, but it came to us the context of leadership and generation gap as an interesting topic. In a few short words, why would you think that leadership and generation gap is something of interest in today's society, if we may say, on today's trends, if we may say?
Well, personally, and I can see it at work, I
Mhm.
see more and more younger people joining the workforce, especially Gen Z. And I do see that there's a difference in their expectations and what they want compared to the older generations. And I feel that the gap is getting bigger in terms of expectations, ways of working, communication style, and so on. And so I think it's an important topic to discuss so that we make sure to bridge that gap and make sure that we get as much as we can from all the employees and not exclude anyone. So I think it's an important topic. And I think as younger people are coming in more and more, will continue to be a key focus area for leadership.
Could not agree more, and I hope that we will also have a young audience from those different generations. Well, from different generations, they'll be also listening to us in regards to this video podcast. And actually, in regards to that, and from what you're mentioning in regards to the changes that are occurring, it definitely makes a connection with the landscape, which is evolving. Which brings me to the first question to you, Laurence, would be considering your role or experience in both ways. How have you observed the landscape of leadership evolve over the years, particularly in the context of addressing the generation gap in the workplace?
Yeah, for sure. I think things have been changing and evolving. And of course, COVID might have also pushed us to change and evolve a little bit faster. I think now there's a much higher focus on inclusive leadership, and we really start to recognize the value and the perspective and the experiences that everyone brings to the table, especially different generations. I also think there's more and more emphasis on communication skills. How effective communication has become really important in leadership, especially to bridge the gap between between the different generation and foster a better understanding and collaboration across the different age groups. And I think also another change that I've noticed is that successful leaders are becoming more flexible and adaptable. So if you want to be successful in leadership today, you have to be a lot more you have to be better at understanding and navigating the different expectations and working styles of the different generations. I mean, Gen Zs and baby boomers don't necessarily
Mhm.
work the same way or want to work the same way. So leaders have to be more flexible and adaptable. And I can see that this is slowly changing. And I also see, at least in my organization and in other organizations, that there's also a lot more focus towards mentoring and mentorship. I think organizations are also recognizing the value that mentorship programs can bring, especially when it comes to transferring knowledge across generations, including reverse mentoring, where younger people also mentor older people when it comes to understanding trends or technologies. So those are some of the key, leadership changes that I see right now in my organization and also in the workplace in general.
Beautiful. I'll hand over the mic to Danny, as you also had a very interesting question you wanted to bring up in regards to a recent post from Lawrence. All yours, Danny.
Yeah, thanks, Loic, and thank you for that, Lawrence. And my question sort of feeds on from that generational gap, and an article that you actually wrote and posted on LinkedIn a short time ago about, I'm 39, I'm a director, and I feel like an imposter. And when we think about that generational gap, and as we get older, I myself I'm in my 40s now, and regardless of the room that I sort of struggle with that imposter syndrome myself. So when we're thinking about that generational gap and the importance of flexible leadership, as you talked about earlier, how important do you think that it is that from a leadership perspective that you're aware of what your skills and competencies are with that generation and how you can be more flexible within your role as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, I'm now also in my 40s, so it's been almost 3 years since I wrote that article. But so I'm in my 40s. I do still suffer from imposter syndrome, regardless of being a vice president. And I do towards any generation. So I have to say, sometimes towards younger people for the knowledge and the credentials they come with. And I also do towards older people that have more experience and expertise than I do, and just more time in the company than I do. And I think it's really important in our flexible approach towards leadership that we also recognize that imposter syndrome is probably one of the things that bridges across all generations, because anyone can have it at any age. But I think it's also important to talk a lot more about it so that people understand that they don't have to compete necessarily against each other in that way, but that everyone can bring different things to the table, and that it's okay to feel not good enough, and it's okay to talk about it. And it's even more important than for leaders to be aware, so they also offer the feedback to their employees, so they help people get over their imposter syndrome, because people are not as productive or as or living up to their potential when they doubt themselves too much.
Thank you. And would it be fair to say, I suppose, that just reading what you said there and looking at it from my own perspective as well, the only way to not get over imposter syndrome, but certainly assist with it, is by talking with people and getting that crucial feedback and asking them about your performance towards them?
Absolutely. Getting feedback. I mean, no matter your where you are in a company, getting feedback and providing feedback to others is so important. It's hard at least for me, to understand how I'm being perceived. So therefore I ask for feedback, because then I know what people believe I'm good at and what they think I should improve. So it makes it a lot easier. And I think it's also okay to be open about imposter syndrome, and also to discuss it openly. We shouldn't be shy about it. It's something that is just so common, actually. So yeah. I think it's really important to be aware and talk about it, so it's also not a taboo, or there's no stigma around it.
No, I completely agree. We always hear that people work for people, and by being open about things like imposter syndrome as a vice president, as a CEO, as a senior director, whatever you be, if you're open enough to say, actually, I, like you, struggle with these things, it makes you more human, and then makes you more likable and approachable within a leadership capacity as well.
Exactly. So it gives back, basically. It does. So it's important to do it.
Perfect. So anyone listening, although it's 3 years ago, I'd recommend that you give that article a little read as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for that.
I will definitely try to post it in the article, if I may, Daniel. Just for the audience, we'll make sure to link it out there at the post that we're mentioning here.
Yeah, it's well worth the 8-minute read that it states. So
I do believe I made a video version of it in the past 12 months. So
even better then.
For those of you who don't like reading, I think I made a video, actually. So.
I wish I'd known that beforehand. Not that I didn't enjoy reading, but I much prefer videos.
Yes.
Danny, you had a question. Go for it.
Yeah, so just building on your insights, it is, to me, it's fascinating how different generations bring unique perspectives to the table. So, from your experience, how do you view leading and fostering collaboration amongst a diverse age group within your team right now, or within your teams in the past?
Yeah, great question. I think in my experience, I found that there's different strategies that are effective for leading and fostering collaboration across different age groups. I think first, really important is communication. I think it's important to recognize how important communication is, but also that communication might be different, and different age group might have different communication preferences. So therefore, it's really important to also provide different channels for communication and use them. Some people rather face-to-face, some people prefer online communication. So the first thing is to really be open and talk about it, also as a team. The second thing is to create a culture of mutual understanding. I think it's important for everyone to understand who they are in the team, but also share their experiences, their insights, their expectations. And by doing that, also breaking down some of the stereotypes, because honestly, we have a lot of stereotypes around what Gen Z is going to be like, around what baby boomers are like. And I think it's important to have that culture of mutual understanding to also break down stereotypes. It's not true that all baby boomers are afraid of technology and that all Gen Zs want to work from home. I mean, it is not the case. So it's important to foster that because it breaks down the gap, right? And then I think also, as I previously said, mentorship also really helps break down that gap, especially pairing people of different generations together, because then they can learn from one another, but also get to know each other and then value what each other can bring to the table. And I think that also really helps foster collaboration across generations. And then maybe, overall, I think one of the most things and maybe the common denominator across everything I've just said is really around awareness. I think it's really critical for us leaders, but also for any employees to just be aware of the potential differences, but also to be aware of the stereotypes and that we have biases towards different generations and they're not always correct. And by being aware, we can already start bridging some of those gaps. And I think that's important.
No, that's a great point. Now, you covered it off there, but the ability to pair people from different generations to be able to work from one another and understand, because like you say, I think there's that natural idea that boomers, as you say, or rightly or incorrectly assumed to be technology averse and maybe potentially the loudest people in the room, whereas your Gen Zs are the exact opposite of that. But everybody has their own different personalities, and the beauty is all we're trying to do is give everybody the same sort of platform and voice to be themselves and to bring as much value to themselves and their organization and whoever they come in contact with as possible. So you shared some great examples of what you do there and how you try to hack these generational gaps. But could you share a specific instance where you faced or saw a leadership challenge related to a generational gap? And additionally, what are some of the key opportunities you see emerging from diversity, and how can organizations leverage these differences for innovation and growth?
Yeah, I mean, let me share maybe one or two examples. One example that comes to mind is really when we have in the past integrated new technologies, let's say automation tool or something to increase efficiency, right? And in those cases, it also means that we're changing the way we work because we are, reducing some of our tasks, and then we change how we work. And I think it's really important when we do that to really bring in everyone, including older generations that might have done these tasks in the past and might not understand their new role. Then what are they going to do instead? So if you're going to implement generative AI for content creation or copywriting, so what do you do with the copywriters? So I think it's really important to, and I've seen that as a challenge, to give them clarity of what it means to them, but also give them the right training so they can work with the technology and really be part of the transition instead of being excluded. And I think that's really important. It's creating that inclusivity. I've also seen another leadership challenge, which is a lot around how people perceive working hours. So many, and now I'm going to stereotype a little bit, but older generations tend to see, how much you work as a measure of commitment, whereas younger people don't necessarily see it that way. And that can be a leadership challenge because it's important for older generations will believe that younger people are just not committed to the work. And so it's really important then for us leaders to bridge that gap and ensure that everyone has a common understanding of what commitment is, and that we can, because I have two other examples, so I'll just share them here. Another example, that I've seen with leadership gap and between generations is that younger employees are demanding a lot more immediate feedback, whereas older generations tend to prefer the more official, structured approach with the yearly cycle. And I've seen that being an issue, especially when managers believe more in the formal feedback people review approach and not giving ongoing feedback to younger generations. And I think that's something that creates a clash and that people really need to be aware of, because it's just a different way of working. Yeah.
And just on that one, I know you said you had a couple more examples, and sorry to jump in there, but is there a secondary challenge with that, I guess, where you want to be able to cater to sort of all requirements? So for example, you have your typical the older generation that prefer from an annual feedback perspective, whereas your younger generations maybe want something more as you say, more immediate, more regular. Does that in itself pose another challenge, because then you're in a position where you need to try and pull all of that information together and look at everything as a whole, but you're using two different processes? Is that a challenge that you share or you've been able to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge because actually, like, companies tend to have the more formal approach, right? Where you log in things and you evaluate people once a year. But when you are constantly being asked to provide feedback and evaluate an employee, you don't necessarily have the tools to also showcase that progress. So you kind of need to find a way to hack the system and put that information somewhere. So when you do the annual review, you remember also the progress, the conversations. And I do think that over time, companies will have to find different ways to provide feedback on a maybe more regular basis, because it is a huge pull from younger people. They want every one-on-one to include feedback, actually, and know what's going on and get the recognition also when they deserve it. That's a lot more immediate.
And again, I mean, I don't have the statistics to hand, but typically I see sort of younger generations now maybe moving around a lot more within organizations as their professional lives grow. So an annual survey in those settings actually wouldn't necessarily be fit for purpose, because by the time you get to that annual survey, you could have lost a lot of that pool of people as well.
Employer loyalty is not valued the same way with older generation as with younger generation. So for sure, you're making a great point there.
Yeah, I mean, businesses are definitely evolving on that aspect with a more continuous approach. I mean, they definitely are aware of this, but there's still a huge gap between the moment we started seeing this changing and companies actually taking action to have more of an instant feedback, as you're mentioning, a continuous approach to surveys and so on. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Apologies, Daniel, I was cutting you on that one.
Yeah, and it was just a final point as well, going back to implementing new tools, new systems, whether or not it be AI or what, and then the how people perceive loyalty to be assigned to the hours that they work. I think it comes back to communication, doesn't it? It's all about it's not what you're implementing. It's how you implement it and how you communicate it to everybody as to what denotes its success within that process. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. I think communication is like the most important thing for bridging this generational gap. Awareness and then communication, and also make it an open topic. So something everyone can talk about and is aware of, and not trying to hide it or pretend it doesn't exist, because that's the worst way to mitigate this.
Yeah, and perhaps be able to give their feedback on any changes before, during, and after, rather than just the after, which tends to be the case, or has tended to be the case in a lot of scenarios that I've certainly encountered in the past. We implemented this 6 months ago. How do you feel?
Yes.
Okay, well, all of the problems have diluted now, and I still don't use it because nobody explained it to me. So, communication.
Absolutely.
First of all, Laurence, thank you very much for taking the time into this video podcast. Danny, thank you very much for co-hosting and for the great questions that you brought. And thank you to our partner, Lutuon. In the meantime, we wish to everyone a great day, and please stay tuned for future video podcasts in the near future. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much. Have a good day ahead. Cheers.